We come to you from Flat Tail Brewing in downtown Corvallis. Mike Parker along with Angie Machado, the publisher of Beaver Blitz. Hello,
hey,
Angie. Good to see you. And, of course, former Beaver great Tim Ewis. Tim, good evening. I don't even know where to start with this game with the Stanford Cardinal. Bitterly disappointing, and yet I think Beaver Nation, a lot of us walked out of that stadium kind of with a sense of pride. I heard fans at the end clapping for the Beaver effort after the ball popped out of Kevin Cummings' chest and there was going to be no overtime, no two-point play to get to overtime. But there was a sense of, man, we just saw a fist fight of a football game where two teams really stood toe-to-toe, and there was a lot of pride, I think, for both teams.
I agree with you, Mike. They did stand toe-to-toe. It was a fist fight. But in the social media atmosphere and the stands where I was at, there's not a lot of feeling good, and there's not a moral victory at the end of a game like that. There's a lot of people that want to understand what it's going to take to get to the next level, and a couple things stood out to me in that game. Number one, again, containing a mobile quarterback, mistakes on special teams, and 17 net yards rushing. The combination of those three things and the failure to perform in those categories is really what cost the Beavers the game when they did stand toe-to-toe, when it felt like a moral victory, when it felt like they did so many things well. And there were fans that were just happy that they were entertained, that it was a good ball game. But at the end of the day, for the Beavers to take the next step, they have to improve in those categories.
Well, Angie, and Tim alludes to things going on in social media, and you're very much involved with that as the publisher of Beaver Blitz and in the Lodge and other social media areas. It was a tough game for a lot of fans apparently by their reaction afterward.
Yeah, and it wasn't like Eastern Washington where, we were seeing calls for coach changes, but it was, the Beaver fans are beyond that. They want to know what it's going to take to get to that next elite level, and they're tired of the moral victories and playing toe-to-toe with, a Stanford, that defensive line. I mean, we talked about it last week, that front seven. They were better than advertised. They are solid.
There were highlights in the game, though, Mike.
Yeah.
I mean, Scott Crichton busting through the line, causing a fumble, returning it, being tackled by a quarterback. But I mean,
an option quarterback.
An option quarterback. But there were some great things that happened in that game. We had a better punt return setup than I think I've seen in the last couple years from the Beavers. Brandon Cooks, both of his punt returns, highly successful. Good
and
blocking.
They really stopped Ty Montgomery, which was a major key to the game.
Except on one play, on the one drive where things got a little bit away. Ty Montgomery catches the long pass. Hogan gets out of a potential sack and scrambles. And Stanford, after getting dominated for most of the half, leads at halftime. Then the special teams play that you allude to, Tim. I mean, there's no question that some things went badly. And my sense of that pride that a lot of fans had at the end, I think, was simply you're down 11 to Stanford late in the fourth quarter, and yet on the last play you still have a chance to win the game. So I think there was a lot about resiliency and toughness that will help the Beavers going forward.
I agree. You look at what they did in those last two drives. The defense saying out, we're going to come out and create a turnover, and doing it.
And get a 3-and-out.
Then getting a 3-and-out after the field goal and having another chance. Brandon Cooks with the great return. Then you look at getting the ball down the field. Brandon getting out of bounds, creating another first down and an opportunity to score. And it didn't end the way people wanted it to. I was just happy we had a chance to make a play to win it at the end, or at least continue the game.
It's the same we've seen, though, all year. There's no give up in this team at all. And like you said, Brandon Cooks with a smart, heady play. Stanford gets the credit for being the smart guys, but Brandon getting out of bounds, knowing where the sticks are to catch the ball beyond the sticks.
And there was another team out there, too, in the Stanford Cardinal, number 6 in the BCS for a reason, and the Beavers gave them everything down to the final seconds that the Cardinal could handle at Reser Stadium. The game did come down to that final play with Sean Mannion trying to hit Kevin Cummings, and it was close. Kevin had a chance to make the play, but as we learned in talking to Mike Riley, Kevin was not 100% right when that play took place.
Kevin's out indefinitely. Maybe he could be back for a bowl game. He had surgery today on his wrist.
Did it happen on the last play of the game?
No, it happened earlier, actually.
It's hard losing a guy, especially like Kevin. He's such a warrior and, does so much for our team. Just being a senior leader and, just all the stuff that he does that's not even really noticed, like his blocking and all the stuff like that. And then, especially in our group. He's just not even a leader on the team, but just in our group, he's just a big leader. So it's definitely a hard loss.
Well, Tim, I hope you agree with me about Richard Mullaney's performance. I thought he was awfully tough and good and sure-handed against Stanford. But he talks about guys like Malik Gilmore and Micah Hatfield stepping up their turn. What do you see going on at the slot?
You know, that is a crucial position in this offense. That slot receiver that can run those overs, can be the tough guy catching the ball across the middle. And Cummings really embraced that role. He enjoyed it. And we had him on the show a couple weeks ago. You asked him about being a coach. And I've spoken with him about this. He is excited to start coaching guys like Malik, guys like Micah in that same role. And he is going to be just as big a part of this and those guys' success as Coach Brennan is. And I like them in that shifty little role, both of those players. But it's something that they'll have to prove, that toughness that they deserve to be out there.
Now, Angie, we have looked, and I think Beaver Nation has looked, hopefully, at Malik Gilmore, and he came in with very good credentials.
Yeah, he was a 3-star at high school, and they actually moved him. He was behind a couple guys with Richard Mullaney, moved him this fall to the slot. And, you know, Coach Brennan said it's just he's doing the things he needs to do. His routes are better. They move him to try to get him some playing time.
Yeah.
And
it's
Kevin,
all about teaching, and a guy like
Kevin
that
has been helping him since fall camp.
A guy like that can be taught really one position. His first year really in the system. A guy like Brandon, he can play any of those positions because he's been in it so long and is just so versatile. But you try to get a younger guy into that one position that they can own that season. And so it's a great opportunity for a guy that has learned that position. And
Micah was great friends with James Rogers. James has helped him. He knows the system. It's 5th year. It shouldn't be too big of a concern, but I mean, obviously Malik will probably have some jitters, you know, coming in.
Well, their time is here. It's going to be fun to watch Malik Gilmore, Micah Hatfield, and with the tight end situation still a little bit in flux, more opportunities for Tyler Perry and Kellen Clute this weekend. Still to come on Talkin Beavers, we'll visit with Dylan Wynn right here on the set. But next, Tim Ewis breaks down the Beavers' loss to the Stanford Cardinals. Downtown will be a buzz Friday night with the USC Trojans in town, and we're planning on talking more and learning more about the Trojans as we go. And in fact, Dylan Wynn will be joining us for a little comparison of Stanford and USC. But it's time for one of my favorite segments, Tim, and that's when you you get your telestrator out, as it were, and help us understand what happened in the last game with the Beavers. We've already touched a little bit on some of the things that didn't go right. But the defense early, when we talked earlier in the show about the dominance in the first half, you've got something that reflects that play early in the game.
Yeah, so I blogged about it this week on csnandw.com, Mike, and my key to the game was containing Hogan and doing a good job of keeping him in the pocket. And of course, the last drive of the first half, they lost that contain. We're going to take a look at a play where they kept the contain and they executed almost perfectly. We got a shotgun formation. We got a 4-down line, Mike, and we're rushing 4 guys on this. Very simple rush. Running back's going to stay in and pass protect in the 5-man, 6-man protection. So here we go. So he commits. Now we've got DJ Alexander at linebacker here, and he's green dogging, Mike. That's what we call it. He's checking that running back out. When that running back commits, he's going to blitz. And Edwin Delva gets in there, creates some havoc, and DJ's able to clean up the mess.
Now, the thing I like, Tim, is seeing Delva it just kept pressing, kept pushing his way in and giving DJ the opportunity to make that play.
Yeah, and he really did a good job all game. Those guys, those penetrators got upfield. You know, later on when we lost contain, we did the same thing. We green dogged. Hogan got out the back door, and the linebacker on that side had overcommitted, trying to tackle Hogan almost the exact same way, and Hogan was able to get around the edge because we lost contain. And it comes down to discipline. That play, the discipline was executed perfectly. We come away with a sack.
Now, as I mentioned earlier, there were 2 teams on the field, and Stanford brought some pretty good players too. And for the Beavers, it was evident pretty early in the game, just as it was for Stanford there, as you've broken down. They were going to have a hard time moving the ball, given the Beavers' defense. You've got a play dialed up that kind of showed what the Beavers were up against all night long.
You know, you're exactly right. And Angie always counts stars. I mean, everybody on that Stanford defense had to have had a boatload of stars coming out of high school.
Oregon State offered both lines, I think, all of them.
Yeah,
and so very good players. We knew they were going to bring pressure, and they were going to win some one-on-one matchups. And we're going to look at a blitz from early on. And these blitzes, you know, Stanford doesn't blitz a lot, but they made it count when they did. So here we go. We got a corner cat coming in, and it's pretty well covered up. You see the safety creeping over there in the background, but Storm is responsible for that. You got the tackle in a one-on-one matchup with the D end, and look at what happens. Storm just completely misses the guy. He just doesn't see the corner cat coming. Sean is able to escape the sack there and get the ball out of bounds. I mean, it was almost an NFL job of escaping that tackle and really making the guy miss. He almost fumbles it, but he gets the ball out of bounds. Really no blood there, but when you get hit like that, Mike, and you feel that pressure, you're going to keep hearing those footsteps during the game, during the whole course of the game, and he got hit a lot in that game.
Alex Carter coming on that corner blitz, and it was on that kind of play, similarly, that Storm Woods got hurt, diving in and protecting in Salt Lake City. He missed it just by a little bit there. It was unbelievable to me that Mannion got out of that. But as you said, Tim, that kind of play early in a game might have changed his internal clock a little bit as things proceeded.
As he said, he missed it by that much.
Exactly. Yeah.
But, yeah, you're exactly right. I think it does change the internal clock, and he got hit a lot in that game. And the O-line has to shore up a little bit. But as you said, Murphy's getting paid a scholarship check as well, and that guy is a darn good player in this league, and he'll be a good player at the next league. So you're looking at times a true freshman matching up against an All-American, and he's going to make plays.
You know, we have since heard that Ben Gardner is out for the Stanford Cardinal going forward, but he and Trent Murphy wreaked havoc in that football game, Angie. And from your perspective as one who follows the entire recruiting scene in the conference, I mean, Stanford has some very good players all over the field.
All over. I mean, they get the guys that are fast, that are big, that are smart, all three. And you can't coach smart, and you can't coach the speed. So, you know, I would say they are on par, maybe nationwide. As
the other thing they do so
guys.
well is they play with their hands, and I always go back to that. You look at a guy like Mike Vrabel. That's the guy that I played against. And he was the cat's meow for getting his hands in there, grabbing on, holding on, being able to two-gap and direct and get a rush. And these guys play a very similar style of football. A guy like Scove getting in there, his explosive hips. Those guys all play really well. They're fast, they're smart,
and they're big. They're big. I mean, they rivaled USC in size when you look at their lines.
And we've got USC coming. Now, we're going to get to more on the Trojans in a moment. One final thing, Tim, from your perspective as a player, we were saying during the radio broadcast that was the most physical, punishing game we'd seen in a long time, that every time a Beaver receiver, running back, somebody made a play, there was a price to be paid at the end of every play, a physical price. What was the most physical game you remember ever being in, either in college or in the NFL?
Oh, Mike, I think in college was when we played a team like USC, because they had so many draft picks on that team. They just beat you every time you touched the ball. And if you caught the ball 5, 6, 7 times, Steven Jackson carried the ball 20 times against them, you took a pounding. There's no doubt about that. And you saw that up front against these guys this week, where it was hand fighting inside. You know, Isaac lost his helmet at the end of the game. There's some chin music happening, and it is a physical game.
It is time now to see who gets the Wilson Motors game balls coming off this gutsy, admirable performance. Nice catch, and thanks for the protection. Tim, we'll start with you. Wilson Motors game ball for the week.
It's got to go to Scott Crichton. He only had 2 tackles, but the havoc he created on that initial play in the first quarter, causing the fumble, getting the recovery, rumbling downfield with it, there was a momentum shift at that point where I believe the Beavers thought we can win this game, and they really changed their attitude defensively to we can stop this power football, we can make plays, and so Scott kind of gave him that go-to push, so I give it to him.
We're going to talk to his fellow defensive end, Dylan Wynn, in a little bit to get Dylan's perspective not only on the fumble recovery, but the return. Angie, your Wilson Motors game ball.
You know Hogan was having nightmares about Scott Crichton footsteps, but I'm going with Sean Mannion. Sean Mannion, 8 sacks, 7 knockdowns, but he kept getting up and coming back. He showed a lot of toughness, and game ball goes to you, Sean. You know,
and for me, Angie and Tim, I mean, I liked the adjustments that the Beavers made to start dealing with some of that pressure. Tight end injuries to Connor Hamlet, to Caleb Smith. The Beavers started getting the ball to their fullback, Tyler Anderson, and Tyler made plays in space in both flats, was involved in protection. So I'm going to give it to an unheralded guy. He's been on the show before, but my game ball goes to a tough physical fullback in Tyler Anderson. Coming up later on Talkin Beavers, we'll have Dylan Wynn join us on the set. But next, we'll break down the USC Trojans. Where will they stand out against the Beavers? Stay tuned. It's time now for the Taco Bell Top 5. And how about this list this week? The Taco Bell Top 5 greatest wins in Parker/Reser Stadium history in the 60th anniversary of the great stadium. And I'm sure it's a very subjective matter. Everybody could come up with their favorite 5 wins. But we've got Terry Baker, the future Heisman Trophy winners, rally in the '62 Civil War from down 17-6 to win that one and go to the Liberty Bowl. Jacquiz's great night in 2008 over #1 USC. But if you had to cast a tiebreaker, I would go with the win on Veterans Day over USC, November 11th, 1967. The Trojans come into town with O.J. Simpson. Jess Lewis caught them. The Beavers win it 3-0. So you see USC represented well on the Taco Bell Top 5, and now there's a 2013 Trojan team coming to Reser Stadium Friday night. We talked to Beaver senior starting left guard Josh Juice Andrews about playing USC and the similarities with that power game of Stanford.
Another good defensive front. Yeah, they're really good up front, athletic. Stanford was more of a power team. They really pounded you, and this USC defense is a lot more athletic, agile team.
Well, that's an offensive player's perspective. Coming up on Talkin Beavers, we're going to visit with Dylan Wynn about what the defense is up against this USC team. And Tim, the Trojans, if somebody says, who is USC? This is a vintage Trojan defensive team this year. Something got away from them in Tempe, and they gave up 62 points. Other than that, they've locked everybody up.
You know, since that game and the staff changes there, they have a new fire in their belly, and they're looking to shut people down, Mike. And it does remind me of the teams that I played against and coached against, where they have those 4- or 5-star recruits, and they get upfield, and they'll pressure the heck out of you, and they'll win man-on-man matchups. And so it's going to be another tough test, another tough defense for the Beavers in their pro-style offense attack.
You know, there's no question about that, Tim and Angie. On the offensive side, they've had some issues at quarterback, but Cody Kessler, coming off the last game, he more than managed the game in the first half. The second half against Utah, USC 3, the Utes nothing. That 3-0 score manifesting itself again. But Marquise Lee, Nelson Aguilar, I mean, there's playmakers on that offensive side.
Tons of playmakers, but they're not the USC offense that you're used to seeing. They're not, and that's because of the sanctions. They're not as deep. They've had some injuries, and they're not the same offense. But defensively, I agree. This is going to be a very big test for the Oregon State offense to try to score.
You know, Tim, on offense for USC, they've had so many injuries, as Angie alludes to, that they were down to walk-on tight ends playing in the last game. Now, in that system, you know that USC's used tight ends well and effectively. The walk-ons, I'm sure, are pretty talented there, but you know you're hurting when you're at that level of depth.
You know what's tough, especially at USC, about the walk-on position. At Oregon State, you can get guys and bring them in as a walk-on and try to offer them a scholarship. A place like USC, it's a private institution. It costs a lot of money to go there. So for somebody to pass up a scholarship somewhere else at a lower division school to walk on at USC, Coach Riley always talked about how difficult that was. We're really blessed at Oregon State, the walk-ons we get. So offensively, some of their struggles, yeah, they had a lot of problems moving the ball early on, and some of that was play calling. Some of that, you know, there were so many things that went into that. Just not knowing who the quarterback was week to week. But third down efficiency, they really struggled in, Mike, and that's something that they've got better at in the last couple weeks.
But the one thing, too, that's clear in watching Ed Orgeron coach this group, whatever cloud was over them with the Lane Kiffin situation, you can see a team that plays with energy and enthusiasm, and you combine that with the talent they do have, and there's a lot of it. It's a dangerous combination.
They seem to be having fun again on the football field, and that's something that the first couple games we watched them against Hawaii, they didn't look like they were enjoying themselves. They're celebrating after big plays again. They have some of that SC swagger back, and I wish Lane Kiffin was still coaching this team coming up here.
They're dangerous. They are very dangerous.
Absolutely. Very talented and fired up to play for Coach Orgeron. So we'll talk more about USC. They've been banged up with injuries. The Beavers have too. Two good teams battling it out Friday night at Reser Stadium. Coming up later, we will give our one thing the Beavers must do to defeat the USC Trojans. We hit the halfway mark of the show. We've talked about the unfortunate loss to the Beaver offense of one of their leaders and great players on the team in slot senior receiver Kevin Cummings. We've heard about that from Mike Riley and Richard Mullaney. Juice Andrews has helped us take a look ahead to just who is USC. We talked to Josh about that. Tim has broken down some big plays out of the game against Stanford. And as we move on, it is our pleasure to welcome to the set to talk about the Stanford game, to look ahead to USC, junior defensive end, the pride of De La Salle High School, a big game against the Cardinal. Dylan Wynn joins us. Dylan, good evening. How are you tonight?
Great. Thanks for having me.
And thanks for coming on the show with us. That game was as physical and punishing and bruising a game as I've seen in a long time. And you guys on defense were delivering a lot of those hits. Just tell us, even in the disappointment of the loss, how you guys as a defense felt about your performance in that game.
Well, obviously, we left a couple things out on the field. I mean, with those two big drives that ended up being scoring drives. But Stanford is a really good team now. They're top in the nation for a reason. They absolutely have one of the best O-lines in the nation, and I have nothing but respect for that team. And when it comes to the big games like that, the littlest mistakes turn into big plays, and so we just had to minimize that. But we knew it was coming into a physical game, and we just wanted to go and attack them like no one else had.
So you just said the littlest mistakes will cost you in a game like that, in those big games. Talk about the discipline it takes on the defensive side of the ball. Playing against a guy like Hogan, that scrambler, everybody has to be accountable every play.
Absolutely. A big thing that we went over during the week is that our backfield had to keep their eyes on the receivers because they do release, and another big thing was the running back. The running back, they do block, but then they have a delay release. And if our linebackers didn't cover that, like last year happened on the goal line, they had a big score. And that was definitely a big thing going into this week, was discipline. And you got to trust the person next to you.
You know, we talked about a little, just you and I. Tell the Beaver Nation about that fly sweep, bringing in the Wildcat, then bringing in another quarterback, and the keys that really the defense was able to pick up and look at in that situation.
We felt like their strength game came with the power and the counter and a lot of the inside run, and so that being a focus for us, especially at the D-line, we made it the primary to defeat that and let no vertical seams down our defense. And when we were able to do that, an adaptation that they did was they went to their fly sweep, they went to their option package, they went to more of the outside runs and the quick passes.
So they went to that little kind of zone read option on Scott's fumble and recovery and nice run. So how was Scott prepared for that D-line? What did Coach Joe, say to you guys to prepare you for that situation?
For specifically Scott's situation, we knew that when that quarterback came in that he's an option quarterback, and that's what we're to expect. And Scott, being the playmaker he is, just decided to pull the trigger on the quarterback instead of just waiting for the inside out like normal. And I mean, when you put a playmaker in that kind of position, something magical is going to happen.
Now later in the fourth quarter, late when you guys needed the football back, the ball was knocked loose, and there it is again. You were only 20 yards out. What was going through your mind in that whole situation? Were you thinking about going Crichton and trying to show him how to get to the end zone?
Oh, I tried to. I definitely did. I'm a little less athletic, I guess. But
do you practice the scoop and score? That's what Mike wants to know.
We do, but I mean, it looks easier on the video games. It absolutely looks easier on the video games.
So, Dylan, you mentioned playing a little defensive tackle. I know in the offseason you spent tons of time in the weight room. You're a total workout fiend. You transformed your body. Talk a little bit about the difference now of playing D and D tackle and how that all kind of came about.
It's kind of interesting. D tackle and D end in our defensive scheme is almost interchangeable. A lot of the stuff you carry over, and when it comes down to it, D tackle is just, it's nice having a little bigger body. Last year I even played a little bit of D tackle, not too much, but more of nose, and it turned into I'm really good against the run game, and when we get into those pass situations with me developing my speed, I was able to find myself on the field, especially this year, more on third downs in those pass packages inside, because we have the fast guys like Devin Kell, Levante Barnett, and many others off the edge, Joshua James. that can put the pressure off the edge, and just being able to get that many more guys that have that skill to close the pocket.
So you got other guys running the hoop doing those things. You're kind of meeting it up inside, grinding on that nose tackle, which I love seeing a guy your size grinding against a 300-pounder at center. But you talked about Crichton's ability to make plays, and I don't know if your stats are exactly where you want them this year because you are so diverse, but 34 tackles, 4 for loss, a sack, 2 fumble recoveries. I mean, you're a ball hawk. You're all over the place. What's your motivation there?
I'm not a stat guy. I've never been a stat guy. My motivation
But you're
is,
a ball hawk. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You're always around the play.
Absolutely. I've always had a high motor. I mean, I've been told that my whole life, and it's really just something my parents kind of instilled in me when I was young. And I mean, why do something if you're not going to do it 100%? So I've really taken that to heart, and I credit that to why I'm at this level and why I've made it this far.
So, Dylan, yes, we've talked a lot from recruiting. It kind of came down to, if I remember correctly, Oklahoma State and Oregon State, correct?
Yep.
And then Stanford kind of tried to play Cal. They all tried to make a play. What was it about Oregon State that sold you on being a Beaver?
It was the environment. Really, it was Coach Reed was recruiting me out of it and showed me a lot of love. And I didn't even really follow college football when I was in high school. So
Big
I came
Nebraska
to visit.
fan, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
My family's
Nebraska.
from Nebraska. I was a Penn State fan when I was like little, but when I came here, it was just a feeling I got. Coach Joe really was straightforward and was like, hey, this is where you fit in. This showed me the schemes and everything, and I can't really describe it, but being able to meet with Riley and having a one-on-one with him and my family, it's like you really got to know who he was, and you can tell how genuinely he cared about the players, and it was a big point for me.
Dylan, thanks for joining us tonight here on Talkin Beavers. Later on Talkin Beavers, Tim Ewis sits down with head coach Mike Riley. But next, Timmy breaks down the USC Trojans. Stay tuned to Talkin Beavers. It's time now for our standard TV and appliance rewind, where we look back to one of the great games in the 60-year history of Parker/Reeser. Jonas Newton with a great catch for a touchdown against SC near the end of the first half. And how about this? Sammy Strotter on a beautifully blocked return goes 70 yards for a touchdown. That put the Beavers up 30-10.
Those plays are so important, Mike.
And back comes, obviously, because back comes USC. They pull within a 2-point conversion, and beautiful number 49, Jeff Van Orso, bats it down.
And the crowd goes
a great
wild.
shot of the sea of orange engulfing Reeser. Angie, what do you remember? Were you there? What do you remember about that game?
I was there, and you know what I remember now, 7-8 years later, was the comeback. I mean, Oregon State was dominating that game in every aspect, and then USC just kept coming back, till it got to that point where Van Orso had to make the block.
Tim, where were you on? You were in the NFL at that point. Did you see that game?
I was down in Arizona. I was watching it. We often get together with the guys at the hotel and watch the games. And, man, I remember how dominant we were. And, everybody, I'm cheering Joe Newton on, catching the touchdown.
Right.
Watching a special teams kick return to the house. That's a momentum maker, no doubt. Sammy doing his thing. Then it came down to that final play and Jeff knocking that pass down. And then I sat there thinking, man, I used to beat that guy up. And I did not know if he was going to be a good player. You often wonder about those guys. And you're blocking them on scout team day in and day out. And you say, is that guy going to be any good? And he ends up, having one of the best plays in Reeser Stadium history.
Well, we talked earlier about Jess Lewis chasing down OJ in '67 on Veterans Day. That play not quite in the same category, but Beaver Nation years from now will always remember Jeff Van Orso batted down, and the Beavers snapped USC's 27-game conference win streak, 33-31. Two guys who provided tremendous memories already, and they're still playing for the Beavers. Brandon Cooks and Storm Woods. It's time for our latest edition of Run and Catch.
Favorite hobby? My favorite hobby would probably fishing. I like to fish when I go back home, and I like to go fishing with my brothers and stuff like that, and do it. What about yours?
I'd say favorite hobby probably outside of football is talking on the phone to the family.
How about that? Storm Woods, when he has spare time, His favorite hobby? Talking to his family on the phone. You believe that, don't you?
I do believe that.
Yeah.
I do believe that. I mean, when he was here, he talked about giving his mom thumbs up, and grandma's right there, and good kids.
Very good kids indeed. Very good players will be on the field on both sides Friday night at Reser Stadium. And Tim, this USC Trojan team, we've talked about their defense. They hang their hat on defense. We're going to see a little bit of that here. We'll also see they can make plays on the other side, too.
Yeah, they can make plays on both sides of the ball. What the Beavers are going to have to do is hold them in third down efficiency, just like their opponents have all year. 29 for 105, Mike. What we're going to take a look at first here is the USC defense. And we're going to highlight Kennard right here. Big D end, standing up. He's got 5 sacks on the season. We've talked about running the hoop. Look at him right here. Just beat this left tackle into the ground, running the hoop, ripping through. Williams comes in to clean it up. Big D end, D tackle. Really well done right here. Good technique. You know, the Utes, they face this all day, and that's kind of what we talked about, that re-energized USC defense, Mike.
And we saw what Travis Wilson is capable of, and when the Utes put up 48 in that classic game at Rice-Eccles Stadium in Salt Lake City, that attack was really working. This Utes team, the Trojans held to 3 points, none in the second half, and 69 total yards in the second half.
Yeah, and that shows how dominant they can be. And like I said, they're re-energized. They've kind of thrown off those first few games from the season. And Utah, I think, thought we can move the ball on these guys. We got a mobile quarterback. They kept him in the pocket most of the day and got a lot of hits on him.
Now, on the other side, Tim, even though, I mean, this USC identity is more about the defense, and Ed Orgeron, a defensive coach, and has done a great job with them, there are playmakers on the other side that the Beavers had better be aware of.
Yeah, exactly. And this is kind of fun to see the USC defense going again. Not exactly against the Beavers, right, but the USC offense now, they have some great players. They always have. You look back at the guys I played against, Reggie Bush, Williams, those types of receivers. Here's what we're looking at. Bone formation, Mike. 3 backs in the backfield, quarterbacks in shotgun. We got a safety at the top of the screen. Cover 2, look at where he's playing, on the hash. We got a one-on-one matchup outside. He can't get that safety help running that corner. They throw over the top to Aguilar. Look at that. Nice little somersault in for the touchdown. Those guys are playing with confidence, with speed. Those are those classic, USC skill positions that we're used to seeing.
Now, we have seen some great ones through the years, and we talked about some of them earlier. You mentioned Reggie Bush. We've seen Dominique Byrd and Matt Leinart and Mike Williams, and a one-handed catch. Or these one-handed catches now in vogue. I think Williams invented it in the game against you back in 2003. Remember that play?
That ball just stuck to his glove. I've never seen anything like it. But Mike Cass had a similar one too. So
and Marquise Lee has been injured, Angie, throughout much of the year. But last year, he set a Pac-12 record that Brandon Cooks is chasing down.
Yeah, and I think with USC, it's just their size. The receivers are big and they're fast. Yeah. They're hard to block. They're hard to guard. They're very physical. And they're, like I said, they're fast, so they can run right past.
And just we just saw, you try to cover them as a cover 2 safety from the hash. They're long striders. They're big. They're tall. They're going to make those plays.
And they're all USC's receivers are like that.
Now, one of the things that has hurt the Trojans, and certainly the Beavers can empathize, the injury situation. And we see here the players that have been ruled out for sure. And certainly Morgan Breslin's absence on the defensive side, 4.5 sacks, will be felt. They had a player last week, an injured free safety named Dion Bailey, who dressed at halftime when another player went out. Sua Cravens, who had made a big play on a return, an interception return, left the game. And according to the LA Times, Dion Bailey took the needle at halftime. It's in the paper. You can read about it. Dion said, I got to help my team and I got to play. Takes the needle. In the NFL, did you see guys doing that once in a while?
Never saw anybody dress up at halftime and take a needle.
Dion Bailey did.
It's actually illegal, but in the NFL. Okay. I can't speak to this college, but hey, you dress the guys you dress and you play with them, but that's valiant of him. Guys don't think about what they're doing to their bodies later on in life, and that's something that a young man like that needs to consider.
That speaks to the dire situation at times, just in terms of scholarship reductions and how tough some of these guys are and the kind of teammates that they are. And we'll see a resilient, tough team indeed for the second straight week. The team coming in will certainly be a big match for the Beavers. Later on Talkin Beavers, we will give our one thing the Beavers must do to get the win against the USC Trojans. I know that anytime Mike Riley coaches a game, there's always somewhere in his soul and heart the memory of a dear friend and a former assistant coach to the Beavers who made huge contributions to Oregon State football. Tim Ewis had a chance to talk to Mike Riley about the late Jim Gilstrap.
When I first came in, I was still playing for the Steelers, and I said, I want to learn how to evaluate these guys, because I have seen the evaluation and how you do get some of those guys. And you look back at the Ken Simonsons, the Sammy Strouders, even the Rodgers, guys that were very good players. DeJuan Edwards is a great example of one that played many years in the league, under-recruited. And you said, go sit down with Gilly. And since his, and he was great at it, but since his passing, who else has kind of picked up that torch of evaluation?
That's a great point, you know, and Gilly was my kind of rock. He was one of the great evaluators of all time. We don't have time for all the stories about that, but I'll tell you this, nobody else in the country recruited this guy except Jim Gilstrap, and he found him, and we actually had him on campus, and then through another long story, he had to go back to JC, and that was Seneca Wallace. And, you know, so, and Gilly was awfully good at it, and so we used him as, when we had a real question about somebody, to, hey, what do you think about this guy, Jim? So, you know, and I think through the course of time, what's happened, even though he's not with us any longer, we've got more experienced people, and we do have more eyes on it. We do have a system that I think has grown since the time we first started. He used to be the fail-safe, right? We don't have him anymore, so it has some...
So it's evolved over time.
Has stages that it has to go through.
When you think about a legacy or an impact, James Newsom, Jonathan Smith, just a couple of names, Tim, that Jim Gilstrap was vitally involved with. You played when Jim was on the staff, and I know you had tremendous respect, as everybody did, for the late Jim Gilstrap.
You know, we call him Gilly. Gilly was a great teacher of the game of football. He was just a great person, cared about his players, great evaluator of talent. He found Sammy Stroudder, flat out just found him, evaluated. That guy poured over more film than anybody I've ever met. You know, the story's out there how he found Jonathan Smith. They're recruiting Jonathan Sinner, who's now a coach up in Portland area. And they say,
Dustin Jans.
Dustin Jans. And Dustin, they say, this guy he's snapping the ball to can throw it a little bit. He can spin it around. And all of a sudden, Jonathan Smith ends up here. So great eye for talent, but more importantly, a great person. One of the kind of people that Coach Riley wants to surround his players with.
And Gilly, if I may borrow the phrase for Jim Gilstrap, in a sense, Angie, his loss was felt for a while because Mike Riley really relied on him in that evaluating process.
Yeah, I think we really saw kind of a decline, even though the Beavers had some good years there on the field. Decline after Gilly passed away, till they found their group and what they were looking for.
Now, in terms of recruiting, always the lifeblood of every program, you know, Jim Gilstrap was a genius at finding those diamonds in the rough. As far as recruiting's going now, the Beavers still will always be involved in that, Angie, but the bar's raised in terms of everything going on in the program, facilities, et cetera, to go after maybe some of the higher caliber recruits.
It is, and like we talked about at the very onset of the show, it's fans want to get to what it's going to take to get to the elite level, what it's going to take to get to that next level, and it's facilities. I hate to say that, and you don't have to have the Taj Mahal, but, you know, the Beavers need to start talking about that, you know, the Valley Football Center expansion. They need to talk about that, the old side renovation. And then going after, there's been a little change I've seen this year with recruiting in that, you know, there might be two-star guys right now. Rivals will reevaluate them, but there might be two-star guys, but especially like on linebacker, Trent Bray is going after speed. Speed first, because you can't teach it. You get the guy, maybe he's a little undersized, maybe that's why he's a two-star. Get him in the weight room, put on a little weight, but he's still got that fast speed, and that's what it's going to take to compete in the Pac-12.
Now, the Beavers will never sell themselves short in any of the things Angie just talked about, but there will always be a place for somebody with the eyes of such as the late, great Jim Gilstrap in terms of finding players that are the right fit for Oregon State. Coming up next on Talkin Beavers, we'll give you our one thing the Beavers must do to defeat the USC Trojans. We're going to be talking not only more Beavers in college football coming up at 9:30 tonight on an all-new Talkin' Ball with Dan Sheldon. Dan will be talking Beavers. He will be talking about college football, but we'll also have a full breakdown of the NBA season opener for the Portland Trail Blazers. Highly anticipated campaign under Coach Terry Stotts. Dan will have Talkin' Ball tonight, Blazers Suns. So keep it right here on Comcast Sportsnet. As far as the Beavers are concerned, USC, Friday night, Dad's Weekend. It should be a great atmosphere. And Angie, it's time for our one thing the Beavers have to do. It's more than one, we understand that. But what's your one thing to beat the Trojans?
My one thing is score points. They left too many points on the board. So the Beavers, please just score some points. That's my one thing.
Well, there were missed opportunities, clearly, to spring an upset, which it would have been over Stanford, Timmy. The Beavers had chances early and left points on the table for sure. Against USC, it may not be as paramount given the season and the injuries and so on that we've talked about. But what's the one thing, in your opinion, the Beavers have to do?
So Angie says score points. My one thing, keep them from scoring points. How we're going to do that? Keep them in third and long. If we keep the Trojans in third and long, they're 29 for 105 this year. On third down, their efficiency is in the gutter. And if we keep that pass rush, we keep the blitzes, we keep them in third and long, make that quarterback make poor decisions, Mike.
We keep it real simple here on Talkin' Beavs. Score points and keep them from scoring points.
Yeah, it is. Kind of most games do come down to that, it seems. But for me, the one thing that the Beavers need to do is simply be better in pass protection, which might help them score points. But after Sean Mannion was sacked 8 times and hit 7 other times and just under duress much of the night, if the Beavers can shore up their pass protection against a very good defensive front and a stingy, nasty physical front, much like Stanford. In a sense, the Stanford game, I think, helps the Beavers in preparation for that. So my one thing, protect better. Tim, do you agree that it actually was of a help to play Stanford first?
You know what? I blogged about it last week on CSNNW.com. I love the way this season has panned out. We kind of played these spread, run and gun teams, air raid attacks. Then we have a couple, pro-style offenses here with Stanford and USC. And then we're going to end with a couple more spread attacks in Washington, Arizona State, and Oregon, of course. So I really like the way the season has laid out.
But Stanford defense also gave USC a blueprint on how to stop Oregon State's passing attack, too.
There is some truth in that. And USC leading the conference, as we talked about, in so many categories. So it figures to be another very interesting, compelling game. Don't miss it. There's still some tickets available. Hope to see you at Reser Stadium Friday night at 6 o'clock.